Hello, welcome to the Gregory C. I prepared a presentation for you today. Let's talk about America. Talk about America in the context of civil unrest, philosophical underpinnings, and the economy. And I've got a couple research papers here for you. The first one is from the Journal of Peace Research, titled Dynamics of Political Instability in the United States from 1780 through 2010. This is from Professor Peter Turchin at the Department of Ecology and Evolutionary Biology at the University of Connecticut. This was published in 2012. So I got a couple quick excerpts for you. The first is a graph relating the number of riots, lynchings, and terrorism over time. And if you notice, there's some sharp increases in the late 1800s and early 1900s, also a peak in the 1970s. And all three of these peaks coincided with civil unrest. In the late 1800s, there was a time of political violence and socio-political instability. There's urban riots, as evidenced by Bleeding Kansas. This was in the late 1850s, early 1860s. There's also a religious war between the United States and the Mormons. The Mormons took an oath of vengeance after Hiram and Joseph Smith were killed in a mob in 1844. And during this time, there wasn't any specific battles between the United States military and the Mormons, but there was definitely some periods of killing, as evidenced by the Mountain Meadow Massacre. I encourage you to look into these things, but a lot of that's to unpack in another presentation. And in the early 1920s, 1930s, a lot of that civil unrest dealt with economic factors. If you remember, the Great Depression started in 1929. And you can see again the sharp rise here of evidence of civil unrest coinciding with these occurrences. Also, there was some riots in the 1970s, not quite as high of a peak there. But again, if you analyze these trends and you look forward into the early 2000s, you see these are on a rise. If we jump to the conclusion that Professor Peter Turchin has written, I'll just read you a quick excerpt. Extending the sequence of 1870, 1920, and 1970 forward suggests that the next instability peak should occur in the United States around 2020. So in 2012, Professor Turchin was predicting that the United States would see civil unrest in the year 2020. And that's coming up next year. The next paper I have is titled A Cultural Evolution Model for Trend Changes in the American Secular Cycle, published by Michael Allen Alexander. And this is from Cliodynamics, the Journal of Quantitative History and Cultural Evolution. So what we have here is figure 4 from that paper, and we're showing inflation and the investment wage index in red and blue. And in the black line, we have a ratio of the two relating to inequality in the United States. And again, if you see sharp trends in the late 1800s, 1920s, 1930s, you see these peaks occurring, which coincide directly with civil unrest in the United States. Could be in the form of race riots, religious wars, socio-political problems. But again, these are times when people are in the streets, people are being hurt, damage is being done to property. And again, something you see is this trending upwards as we go into the early 2000s. And if this trend continues, we may see some validation to Professor Turchin's predictions from the previous paper. So I'm not saying that something's definitely going to happen in 2020. I don't know. I can't predict the future. I'm not trying to scare you, but this is a time to educate ourselves and prepare for what might be coming in the United States. Pulled a couple scriptures for you to put something in context. I'm not trying to promote religion, but sort of put this into a philosophical context. And it's from Deuteronomy 15. This is talking about money lending. This is from the Old Testament. Money lending is discussed in the Bible many times, also in the New Testament in the book of Luke. But here we have, at the end of every 7 years, thou shalt make a release. And this is the manner of the release. Every creditor that lendeth aught unto his neighbor shall release it. He shall not exact it of his neighbor or of his brother, because it is called the Lord's release. And one more quick one. This is from Exodus 22:25. This deals with the using of usury. which is charging interest on loans. If thou lend any money to any of my people that is poor by thee, thou shalt not be to him as an usurer, neither shalt thou lay upon him usury. So in Deuteronomy, there are provisions for usury, but there are many other passages throughout the Bible which strictly forbid usury. What I have here is the website of the MCB Islamic Bank. I'm not trying to promote Islamic banking or Christianity or Islam in any way, but just to put these in a philosophical context, I'll read you a quick excerpt from their website talking about what is Islamic banking. It says Islamic banking is defined as a banking system which is in consonance with the spirit, ethos, and value system of Islam and governed by the principles laid down by the Sharia. Interest-free banking is a narrow concept denoting a number of banking instruments or operations to avoid interest. Islamic banking, the more general term, is based not only to avoid interest-based transactions prohibited in Sharia, but also to avoid unethical and unsocial practices. Key sentence there: to avoid unethical and unsocial practices. To continue, in practical sense, Islamic banking is a transformation of conventional money lending into transactions based on tangible assets and real services. The model of Islamic banking system leads towards the achievement of a system which helps achieve economic prosperity. And another section of this website, it talks about the My Car automobile loan program. Notice here it says finance tenure from 1 to 7 years. And why I'm bringing this all to you and bringing this to your attention is I just find it very curious that Islamic banks are much more closely aligned with Christian values than the financial system we have in the United States. Next, I have a graph of the purchasing power of the US dollar from 1900 to 2010, and if you'll notice, a very dramatic decline, which is almost constant over time. And the next two websites I have, this is from the federalreserve.gov, and this chart goes from 1998. This shows the total number in billions of dollars of total money in circulation in the United States. So in 1998, there's $19.3 billion. In 2018, there's $43.4 billion. So in the late 90s, we've more than doubled the amount of money in circulation in the United States. This is a very similar graph. This goes from, I think, 1959 up till 2019, and this shows the amount of money in billions in the United States in circulation. So as you can see, this trending upward. This is the most data I could get. I couldn't get it all the way back to 1900 to correlate with the previous graph, but what I'd like to show here is that, again, from 1998 to 2018, there's been more than double the amount of money in the United States. And so if we jump back and we look at 1998 and the 2012 approximately, which is shown on the graph, we can see that the value of the dollar has been cut in half. I would interpret this to mean about $6, $6.50, and we're down to $3.50 now. So the value of the dollar has decreased in half its value while we've doubled the amount of money in circulation. And also, we consider the repo market bailout, which is happening now from the Federal Reserve. That includes, and I've heard estimates of $500 billion up to $1 trillion, which will be injected into the repo markets at the end of this month, or during the period at the end of this month and early next year. So again, the number of dollars in circulation in the United States will be increased by potentially up to $1 trillion in just a few weeks. So again, that'll deplete the value of your money and the purchasing power of the money that you have, and will definitely help others, but may not help us. So to wrap this all together, we see that our purchasing power is going down. Interest rates have remained mostly constant, but the number of dollars in circulation has done nothing but increase over time, and will be happening dramatically here now. And if we look back at Professor Turchin's predictions and Mr. Alexander's predictions, we can see that potentially there may be some civil unrest in the United States coming in the coming years, and this may be related to what's happening with the economy. I really just want to bring this all to your attention. Thank you for your attention today.